Good afternoon or good evening, actually, and welcome to Black Press Live, the National Newspaper Publishers Association's special election coverage. Every Tuesday night, and including election night, we will be talking the election and what obstacles they may be, especially with African American and minority voters. Tonight, we were scheduled to have Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. We got very late word that she has fallen ill in Florida and could not join us. But we are still excited about tonight's lineup. And let's bring in right now from North Carolina, Fran Farrer, and from Mississippi, Deanna Tizell Jones, two of our distinguished publishers. So tonight, we start with some breaking news that happened just a couple of hours ago. The census count, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration can now stop the census count before the end of the month. In fact, they can stop it at any time now. Deanna, Fran, let's start there. You want to weigh in on that?
I guess we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
I really, we've looked for and known that there were going to be interruptions throughout every part of it. The first one being that he's not protected us. He ended up with COVID. I really think he still has it, but.
Well, he's in a huge rally tonight, Fran, just so you'll know, in Pennsylvania. It has to be several thousand people at this rally. Many of them, of course, are not wearing masks, and you say that. But before we even get to that and the other Trump distractions, let's talk about the census, though.
The census, I've pushed it everywhere I can. I cannot understand why people will not. We've done everything that we can do on the ground, but we should not stop. They put an extension on it, and to disrupt that extension is harmful to us. As publishers, I'm sure all of us have tried to do all that we can to get people to not be afraid. And I think that's part of it. They're afraid that people will be, sent back home or wherever because they won't participate. So I don't know where we are. I've done all that I can, and I know all of you have too.
Yeah, and Deanna, I know that the Jackson Advocate has been doing a lot with the census as well. Hearing the news today, what was that like in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's just another way that we are being disenfranchised throughout this entire year, and really throughout the Trump presidency. You've seen a multitude of ways that African Americans especially have been disenfranchised. But to affect the census affects so much. The way that we acquire funds, the way that we're counted affects our daily lives.
Yes.
From medical care to the infrastructure of our state and of our cities and counties, to the allocation of funds for different entities that are very important, even down to a really vital issue now, broadband, where lots of children are going to school virtually and they don't have internet access in their areas. And the funds that would come from the census in the future would help us to better update our internet infrastructure. And you can just see the problems and issues with not being counted in the census across the board and trickling from every crevice that there is. So it's really a travesty that we don't have the bandwidth or the leeway to have a little bit more time during a global pandemic to be counted. That's really what it comes down to being counted. Right. And we need that desperately.
Yeah, and so among the other issues, there's so many issues. And I know one of the things last week we talked about on this program with Dr. Chavis, our president and CEO, Dr. Ben Chavis. Dr. Chavis had an edict: do not be distracted. Do not let the Trump administration distract our coverage and also our outreach. So with that said, we know that the Supreme Court confirmation hearings are going on in the Senate right now. Lindsey Graham of South Carolina is actually the chair who's leading those confirmation hearings right now. What do you take from this, Fran and Deanna, the confirmation hearings, and how are you guys covering it in your newspapers?
Well, I haven't covered it to this point. We are working on that now, but we've covered everything that we can about the discrepancies, and Deanna listed almost all of those. The census is so important, and this is when this election is really important. When the person that's on the Hill is not looking out for everyone, we should be pushing this census terribly. I mean, every moment, every day, there should be something from the White House about the census. We're not getting it. So when we look at the census and we look at, I listened to part of the it was terrible. I listened to this morning when I listened to the questions and the answers, and I was real impressed with our Democratic judge that spoke and asked questions. But I think if we don't, I think that we're going to be in trouble. I'm trying. I'm short. I'm really. It was kind of upsetting to me, and I looked at her family, and I'm thinking, how can you have such a blended family and such a narrow mind in certain areas? That's just kind of the way I felt. And then I thought, as many people do, are you doing this just for, the publicity? And it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard to say that a Supreme Court judge, and in this case, Amy Barrett, is doing it for publicity as much as it's a lifetime appointment. Who wouldn't want that as a judge, right? Deanna, when you think about the hearings that are going on, you think about Judge Barrett. What's your feeling on this? What's your thoughts about the judge?
I'm glad that the one thing that I would like to say is that I'm glad that a woman is being represented. I think it's important for a woman to be represented since that space was occupied by the notorious RBG. But I think what's peculiar about it, and is also, you can note it in the case of how Justice Clarence Thomas came onto the court, is that there was also a famous Black man by the name of Thurgood Marshall, who was the first Black Supreme Court justice, and he was replaced with someone who was the total opposite in ideology, even though he was also a Black man. And now you have history repeating itself, where you have a woman who will replace a woman on the court, but she is the total opposite in ideology of what RBG stood for. And so it's very peculiar in that way. The second thing is that she has failed, especially in these hearings, to come up with adequate representation and documentation of her previous statements and actions. When she has said that she supports the overturning of Roe v. Wade, she has not been forthright in her stance, that she has her historical stance in that matter. Also, she failed, is just incoming news, breaking news, that she has failed to say that Trump should, if he is not elected, that he should get out, that he should relinquish his power. Yeah. So there are some very peculiar things that are happening with this nomination. Even the fact that she was nominated at a time when Barack Obama was president, they did not allow him to have his nominee confirmed because they said that the incoming president should have that right. And they pushed it, but yet they are going back on their word. Not just Mitch McConnell, but also Senator Graham, and also other members of the Senate have gone back on their word, have been hypocritical, and we should not stand for that. The way that I see that people can really change that is in the states where we can turn those seats blue. You have to go out and vote. Those Senate seats are up for grabs. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to have a little bit of normalcy and a little bit more of the truth and the democratic way if we're able to really have a little bit more power.
Yeah, thanks, Deanna. And with that, Deanna, you're right. There's 23 Senate seats that are up. Now, I know that a lot of the prognostications say there's potentially 13, that as many as 13 that could flip in total, given the Democrats maybe a 3 to 5 seat net gain, which if Biden is elected president, they need 3 seats. If Trump is reelected, the Democrats would need 4 seats. And that takes us to North Carolina, because you have an interesting race there as well in North Carolina, with the Democratic contestant recently revealing some personal information about his personal life and his infidelity or attempted infidelity anyway. And then, of course, over to your neighbors in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham is in the fight of his political life. Fran Farrer of the County News in North Carolina. What are you making of this, Fran? And how important are these down ballot, the Senate and down ballot? How important are those races?
Those races it's paramount that we win these races. We have Lindsey Graham. We have Tom Tillis. We have to get these seats filled. Every point, everything that I go to, I try to speak on this level. And slipping back to the judge, which is very important, if you noticed, and I know Deanna was listening as well, it's okay to be able to repeat word for word what the Constitution says, and says that you're going to follow it to the order of the law. And I felt like that was just like a camouflage this morning when I was listening to it. I thought about, what about the life of all these individuals? And then slip back to what was said earlier about this should not happen prior to the election. But Trump is so confident. And our people of color, I've never been prejudiced, but our people of color have to realize that Trump has bought who he could. Just think about his man, Cain. How many times after Cain passed away, did he say anything? But people like Lindsey Graham and all the negative things are popping up about Cal Cunningham, even about Jamie Harrison. And where did they get all this? But have you noticed, and Norm is so good with all this technology, have you noticed how some of these people, they didn't say the things at the times that these commercials, and that's what people do in commercials, but Jamie Harrison has won a lot of lives and votes in South Carolina. Elma Adams has won a lot of votes. Cal Cunningham, I think, can still win, but we have to be on the ground.
Yeah, we've
pushed, and I'm putting some of my endorsements out this week with some definite things, definite points on each person, but it's going to be a fight.
Yeah,
it's going to be a fight.
So look for the County News this week for Fran Farrer and the County News' endorsement. We're joined now by our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, just so you'll know, the Congresswoman from Florida, Frederica Wilson, took ill late this afternoon and wasn't able to join us as planned. But you sent a message to us last week, Dr. Chavis, to the publishers, to all of Nnpa, not to be distracted by the president and the antics that come out of the White House. Dr. Chavis, can you elaborate a little bit on that message and what Black Americans should be focused on?
Thank you. And I just want to say greetings to our publishers from Charlotte and from Mississippi and from other places that have joined us. And on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press of America, Stacey, thank you, and thank our other guests who are with us tonight. And of course, our prayers go out for our Congresswoman from Florida. We hope that she will regain her health. These are trying times that we're living in. And I believe that this election is the most consequential election in American history. And it's certainly important, as Fran was just saying, for Black America. We have to get out to vote. The best antidote for voter suppression is a record voter turnout. And we're seeing in those states that have early voting, long lines. But I'm so pleased to hear from some of the people who are standing in line, particularly those Black Americans, saying, look, if I have to stand 8 hours, I have to stand 6 hours, no matter how long it takes, I'm not going to let anybody take away our right to vote. I think this is so important because the way things are structured in some of these counties, some of these states, it is to discourage our voting. It is to sometimes prevent our voting. And of course, so many of our people in our communities, from Mississippi, from North Carolina, from Georgia, I just go down the road, as Malcolm X would say, the whole country is the South. Anything below the Canadian border is the South. When it comes to Black people being empowered politically, economically, spiritually, culturally, in all the ways. But voting right now is the main thing that we have to focus on. And I'm proud that the Black press in all of our cities are banner headlines on our newspapers about the importance of the vote, and also headlines about some of the consequences. And I heard what you said about the down ballot, Stacey, which is so important. So not only is the presidential race important, the vice presidential race important, members of Congress important, but also governorships, county commissioners, city council, school board, all of these positions are so important. Anybody that can make a decision over the quality of life of our community shows that our votes must be focused. We must not only just, because somebody says who they are, we have to look at their platforms with the issues that they're running on. But as I surveyed around the country over the last days, I think there's a momentum building toward November the 3rd. Because of all the mail-in ballot and all the things that have been done to suppress the vote, we probably will not know the final answer to early sometime on the 4th or even by the 5th. But we should stay vigilant. It's not going to be like Juneteenth. We'll have to wait several years before we find out the answer. But I want people to not lose their patience, not become frustrated, because things sometimes are designed to make us frustrated, to make us throw up our hands, to make us think it's hopeless, or to make some of us think that our votes don't count. But every vote counts if you vote. Now, your vote won't count if you don't vote. It's just like the census. Every census document will be counted if you fill out the census. And you saw that the Supreme Court ruled today that the Trump administration can cut off the census arbitrarily even before they finish counting. And that's just another tactic to not only keep us from voting, but also to undercount us, because the census every 10 years determines the allocation of resources, the distribution of resources.
Trillions of dollars, Dr. Chavis.
Yes, a lot of money is at stake. And so we're very pleased that many of our publications got census ads, and we were hoping that they would extend the census so we could continue to mobilize around it. But the Supreme Court ruled today. And that is why these hearings that's going on now in Washington are so important. They're talking about the Democrats packing the courts. That's what Republicans are doing. They are packing the courts.
Over 300 federal judge appointments made by the Trump administration, none of them African American, by the way. And on the Supreme Court, this will be what, his third judge now, or second or third judge?
Second judge.
Second one. And Fran Farah of the County News and Deanna Johnson of the Jackson Advocate, to your point earlier, the hearings with Justice Barrett this morning, one of the primary questions asked was, would she recuse herself if the election came down to the Supreme Court having to make a decision? She refused to answer that question. And that's important, as well as the Affordable Care Act. Now, keep in mind with the Affordable Care Act, there's no replacement plan. The Trump administration has not said or come up with any plan to replace the Affordable Care Act. Thus, 22 million people, an estimate, 22 million people would lose health care immediately, particularly those with pre-existing conditions and who generally has the pre-existing conditions. We know it's people of color. So Fran, Deanna, Dr. Chavez, you guys want to jump in on that aspect of the hearings for the?
Well, I'll pass. I want to hear from Deanna and from Fran. I'm just here. I'm playing a supportive role of my publishers because I know they're on the front line and they have their ear close to the ground in Mississippi and in North Carolina. I just want to say this parenthetically about the Affordable Care Act. I have a sister, her name is Francine. She practices medicine in Oxford and Graham County, North Carolina. And once the Affordable Care Act was passed, and Obama was president, my sister told me she saw whole families, Black families, that would come to the doctor for the first time in their life. Because normally in many of our communities, they don't go to get health care unless it's through the emergency room. You know, an emergency room is for something, it is an emergency because they did not have health care insurance. But because of the Affordable Care Act, a lot of them had pre-existing conditions, afraid to go to the doctor because of the pre-existing condition. One thing was the cost. How can you afford? Health care was not affordable. So I just want to say that when they're talking about ending health care amidst a pandemic, that's consigning millions of people to an early death.
Well, another large population.
I hate to be that morbid about it, but that's what's at stake.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I want everybody to vote. We got to create a new situation so we can save some lives in our communities.
Yeah, and another large population group to lose coverage are young people 25 and under that are currently on their parents' plan. And Deanna Tisdale Johnson, before we go to you, I just want to remind our viewers that Congresswoman from Florida, Frederica Wilson, had taken ill. She was scheduled to join us tonight, so we're hoping that she is okay. Deanna, you want to jump in on that idea of how many, particularly minorities, that will lose coverage?
Yes, I think it's really scary, actually. It would be scary in a normal situation, but it's even more frightening that we're in the midst of a global pandemic and people who are suffering with the after effects of COVID-19, those who may contract the disease in the future, they will be left with minimal options in a world where African Americans are already mistrustful of the healthcare system. And how does that even affect vaccination? You know, how much do you have to pay for the vaccines that are coming out? There are about 2 of them that are in development in the United States. So how much are those vaccines going to cost us if there are millions of people who are not on healthcare anymore? That is something that I'm concerned about. And I think that we should delve more deeper into what are some of the ways that we can protect ourselves if the ACA is no longer there for us to protect us.
Yeah, and remember too, the basic premise of the Affordable Care Act under President Barack Obama was that he mandated that everyone have health coverage, right? And the mandate really was to keep the costs low, because the more people you have in the system, the less that the providers would charge. And I'll let you expand on that, Fran Farrow of the County News. I just wanted to welcome Bobby Henry, who's watching us, our publisher out in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the West Side Gazette. Annette Phillips, we always enjoy you tuning in to the Black Press. We really appreciate how loyal you are to us, and so we stay loyal to you as well. Thanks for joining us. So Fran and Prince Mallory, want to say hello to Prince Mallory as well. So Fran, I want to toss that to you as far as the Affordable Care Act and Justice Barrett, who seemingly has every intention on voting to strike down the healthcare law.
Well, I'm past that age, past that sweet 65 age, that it's important to me, but it's important to everyone. The Affordable Care Act and Obamacare's, all of his programs that care for everybody. And I feel like this has been a part of a plan, to either send us back into slavery, or it's just like suicide. I mean, not suicide, where people are having to just not have any health care. And you get so angry you can't even speak about it. But this is why our people should vote. This is why we as publishers put all that we can into it, and they have to realize. And again, I'm not a prejudiced person, but our people of color have to realize some of them that are doing better at a moment, they're being bought. We have to have people during this election put in place that represent every state in the United States of America. We have to have support for that. And between Obamacare, healthcare, but I see all of these, and abortion. I think I mentioned earlier in conversation that some people are voting for Trump because he doesn't believe in abortion. Well, Trump has probably paid for many people's abortions himself.
The views expressed is that of Fran Farrow of the County News, and not that necessarily of the National Newspaper Publishers.
No, but I'm just saying he's probably done it. But yeah, we have people that don't believe in abortions, and they're voting for him for that sole reason. And that bothers me. And, but healthcare is paramount for our people.
Yeah. And Dr. I'm sorry.
And to get that and help them keep that, we need to raise, and in our state of North Carolina, and Ben will attest to this, fighting for a raise of at least $15 per hour minimum wage. The people cannot make enough money, but then yet they're defaced and talked about as if they don't want to. People want to work. We talk about the crime. All this rolls up in a package. It's because people don't have money to do the things that they need to do to take care of their families. Fathers that, cannot get a job that can pay for a house, meal, and medical bills.
Yeah.
That causes people to go into a rage. That causes not all of, but a lot of the crime. Mm-hmm. Because people are not getting paid well on these jobs. So they'd rather sell drugs or whatever to try to make it. And then, of course, they become in prison. So we need judges on the on the supreme level and every level, our local judges and everything. We need to keep affordable care. And there's no replacement, like Stacey mentioned earlier. There's nothing out there because they don't care.
Yeah, well, we definitely need some sort of healthcare law in effect. Given that, Dr. Chavez, I want to go back to, because you mentioned this earlier about the voting process and when the votes will be counted. But given that 2 of the 50 states have laws in place that prevent the counting of any votes until Election Day, several analysts believe that a final count may not be achieved for up to 2 weeks after Election Day. Again, I guess that speaks to your position of keeping your eye on the prize, Dr. Chavez.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, I think that if we turn out, if we get up to 90% of the Black vote turnout, we will know on November the 3rd. If it's a close vote, then they're going to string it out. They may even try to steal the election. But I think in the swing states, in the electoral college states, like Florida, Ohio, North Carolina. I think that even in Mississippi, we have some close races. So I would say all the states, we need to be vigilant. I'm glad Bobby Henry is on and other people are watching. We just need to be vigilant. I also believe that people are early voting, and we're getting statistics now to show that the early vote so far is unprecedented in terms of turnout. And most of those are people of color. If you look at who's standing in line, it's brothers and sisters from our community. Because this is, in a sense, a payback. But I want to make an analogy. You remember right after the George Floyd tragedy and the other tragedy, Breonna Taylor, our people were marching and had allies marching, Black Lives Matter. We should march those marches straight to the polls. We should say Black votes matter. Mm-hmm. Black votes matter because Black lives matter. Black votes matter because Black lives matter. And I think that we can make a critical difference. So I see Fran making a note. I know what the headline is going to be.
Yeah, she's probably making notes there, Dr. Chambers.
Exactly. So, but my thing is, we do have to, the reason why I'm saying this, we have to not just change the narrative, but we have to become the narrative. In other words, don't wait for the mainstream press to say how bad things are. We have to say, yes, things may be bad, but look, this is our solution. We got a solution to this voter suppression. And that's why we're going to overwhelm the polls with our votes. We're going to overwhelm the right politicians with our votes. We're going to train our young people, even before they're 18, about the importance of voting. So it's going to be an intergenerational march to the polls, an intergenerational show of force, an intergenerational stand up and speak out and vote like never before. And people would say, well, what's at stake? Our lives are at stake. You know, I think this COVID-19 pandemic, earlier today, we had a conference call with Mr. Redmond and all the people at the CDC. We're trying to negotiate for them to utilize the Black press more and get out the messaging. Because even during the pandemic, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of stereotypes, myths. You know, I'm on social media earlier. I saw people trying to discourage Black people from voting. You know, and of course, some of those accounts are not even, they use a Black person's picture, but if you look down, it's not coming from Black people. So we got to be aware of the tricks. We got to be aware of the subterfuge. We got to be aware of the hidden hand sometimes that's behind a lot of these antics to try to divert our attention. So I'm so proud that for 193 years, Stacey, the Black press has not only created its own narrative, which is the narrative of our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality by Black America and others, because the truth of the matter is other people benefit when we gain a measure of equality, when we gain a measure of empowerment. It not only benefits us, it benefits all people. And that has been our history in this society. So when Vice President Biden says that the soul of America is at stake, that is true. You know, the future of America is at stake. And I think that today's hearing at the Senate just exposed how callous, how non-caring. I mean, they just sit there, even though some great speeches were made, it was like they were going through one ear and come out the other because they've already made up their mind. But you know what? They have shown us where they're coming from. Now we have to show where we're coming from. See, that's that, you know, from a civil rights perspective, we have to make sure that we punctuate our narrative with our activity, with our mass engagement. And I think that a lot of those demonstrations that we saw in the spring and in the summer, I'm seeing now that momentum being translated into real votes. I'm seeing that momentum being translated. We have more young brothers and sisters now running for office than never before. And I'm going to give a shout out to Black women. Look, the truth of the matter is Black women are making a difference. And I'm so proud of Black women in all these places making a critical difference. And I want our sisters to know that the Black press supports them, advocates for them, and making further. We got a sister running for vice president of the United States on the ballot, on the ticket.
Yes.
We were so excited in 2008 when Barack Obama was on the ticket as president. Now we need to be just as excited about Kamala Harris being on. And because I represent the Nnpa, I'm not making a partisan statement. We are nonpartisan, but I'm making a cultural statement. I'm just saying that it behooves us to see who's on the ballot and to have cultural affinity, if nothing else, to make sure that we make a critical difference.
Yeah, and thanks to the leadership of the Nnpa, our chair, Karen Carter Richards of the Houston Forward Times, Dr. Chavis, our Nnpa president, CEO, Claudette Perry, the executive administrator, and our news director, Norman Rich. We'll be doing this every Tuesday night, including election night. We're going to talk about the issues. Dr. Chavis has given the edict. Don't be distracted. So there are a lot of distractions, right? We saw today in Virginia, the last day to register to vote. What happened? The system went down suddenly, mysteriously. They said it was an accident. In Houston, in Texas, I should say, the court ruled in Texas that one drop-off point per county, I believe it was, Dr. Chavis. Yes. And then there's other states.
Some people have to drive 100 miles to drop their ballot off. It's ridiculous.
So Fran Farrow, County News, Deanna Johnson, let's talk about that. What are you seeing in Mississippi, for instance, as far as voter suppression efforts, Deanna?
Yes. So I'd like to just say that this year, our job has been not just sharing information, but also exposing misinformation. That has been a lot of what we have done this year. And to Dr. Chavis's point about social media accounts who pretend like they are Black people, but are actually not. I mean, that was exposed in the Mueller report, that Russian accounts were, pretending to be Black organizations and pretending to be Black people so that they could suppress the vote and tell people not to vote. So it's a real problem, and it has been since 2015, 2016. And we're just seeing more of it now. In Mississippi, I found it quite strange that our governor, we are one of the only, if not still the only state that has lifted the mandatory mask mandate in the nation. So you don't have to wear your mask if you don't want to in Mississippi. But why did that happen right when the state fair is taking place and a couple of weeks before a presidential election? And it actually happened a couple of days before some really big national news. So those things kind of, perk your ear up and you try to put your ear to the ground and see what's going on amongst the people. I was able to talk to one of our election commissioners, and she was saying that they were once told that if someone did not want to wear their mask, this was, I think, a day before the mask mandate was lifted, they were told by the Secretary of State, by the Mississippi Secretary of State, that if someone didn't want to wear their mask in the poll, then they could bring out the ballot to their car and they could fill it out then. Well, a couple of days before the mask mandate lifted, they were told again by the Mississippi Secretary of State that that was no longer applicable. So now when people enter the polling place, they can have their mask on, they cannot have their mask on, they still can be, they have to be serviced. And so I think that presents a very different type of voter suppression where people will say, I don't want to go places where people don't have their masks on. and that may keep them from voting. There's another thing where the president has said that people should go and watch the polls. So what does that mean when you say that people should go and watch the polls? And in Mississippi, they may not have their mask on. So that presents a problem to me that I think we should all be aware of as we near the election.
Yeah, and one of the things too to keep in mind when we talk about the voter suppression efforts, Fran, for more than 1 million change of address forms were lost by the post office as well, Fran.
It's been terrible, but we have to be on top of this. When I'm kind of like my sister here, when you talk about the oppression and you talk about the votes, and I'm gonna tell you right now, your mind takes over a whole different situation. But I'm thinking that we have to, as newspapers, talk about what we should do, because I'm feeling with some of the things I've seen in North Carolina, I've seen a video of how bad it's going to be if Trump loses. So we know that and people are supposed to be watching. I have feared that some of these people will not come out, as was just stated, because if somebody comes out and says something about someone voting and it makes them leave the place, and a lot of places in Charlotte and in our areas in the county where my office is in Iredell and Statesville, churches are places where people are voting. Libraries are places where people are voting. And these people feel they've been feeling safe, but having heard some of these comments, so many people are backing up. So we have been trying to push early voting.
Yeah,
we've been pushing that, particularly for people, that are older. We're trying to get people to take people in cars rather than in buses, so that they won't be close together. But this is where our newspapers we have to be on the front. We have to put big pictures on the front page. Comments. I'm serious. It's real important right now. I'm proud to say that we've been doing that, and all we can do is keep this up, get all of our papers out there, get all of us present, and giving people options to things, rather than go A day, go B day.
yeah.
Be the first person there before the lights come on for the early voting, and just stand in line. Take a lawn chair. I mean, we're trying to. I'm really and sit down, and I've seen that happen.
Well,
I've only, personally voted early once because I like election day, but I might be out there on a lot of other days just trying to help people.
Yeah, one of the things that one of our viewers, Monica Levin Runson, says, I think early voting is going to be the key. And Deanna Tisdale Johnson, Dr. Chavis, reminded us too that the Republican Party in California admitted that they set up fake polling boxes. Dr. Chavis, you've been in the civil rights movement for 50 plus years. Talk about that, please. This situation in California.
Well, again, voter suppression, you have to understand, why are they spending millions of dollars to suppress our vote, to keep us voting? Because they know how important our vote is. Exactly. We have to know how important our vote is. And when these people in California set up, it's actually illegal. They set up fake boxes for people to drop their ballots in. I think the current Attorney General of California needs to arrest those people who did that. That's a violation of our voting rights. That's subterfuge. So they're being callous about it. Voting is something sacred. What Fran said, that a lot of people voting places are at their churches, and that's a good thing. But I think we have to again be vigilant. What happened was, Stacey, it was because some of the voters in California noticed that these things went wrong, they reported them. So that's a good thing. They say if you see something, tell somebody. Well, if you see something wrong at the polls, say something to somebody. If somebody is intimidating people at the polls, call them out. Don't let them get away with these tactics without being called out. I just found out that they not only were going to kidnap the governor of Michigan, but they were also going to kidnap the governor of Virginia. So these people are, in my view, a little mentally disturbed, and they're well armed, they're well financed, and they've been getting a green light from high places in our society. So there's a lot at stake, but I think they dare not try to take the election. But the masses of people, the more people vote, the more secure the democracy will be. If we don't vote, then it does put the American democracy on shaky grounds. And of course, I think that's been the tactic all the time. If you look at what has been happening in Washington and now in some of these quote unquote battleground states, you're going to see more of that. We only have a few days left before the election.
That's it.
So I think, the Black press, in our headlines, in our news coverage, on our editorial pages, on our news feature pages, we have to encourage our people to vote, in spite of these tactics and antics of voter suppression and just flat out trickery. Malcolm used to say, "Don't be bamboozled." So don't go for the okie doke.
That's right.
We have to pay attention and be alert and stay focused.
Well, in a panel last week, we had Congresswoman from Ohio, Marcia Fudge on. We asked if the guests felt that young people were not aware enough of their history and the struggle that led to Blacks winning the vote. Does the panel agree, and do you guys believe that the lack of awareness affects the youth vote and engagement? And I think it's appropriate to start. Oh, go ahead, Fran. I was going to say it's appropriate to start with the youngest one on this panel, but go ahead, Fran. You can start it off.
I think that it is, and that's parallel to one of my concerns that
Fran is young also now. Don't put her in the rock and
yes,
Okay.
it was my birthday yesterday. Yes, I had a birthday yesterday. Our school system across the nation has harmed our children from not putting history of our Native Americans, of our African Americans, of this, that has put a damper on their lives and making them feel comfortable anywhere. We have killed our children by stealing. Now children don't even have to write cursive. It's one of the 2 ways to prove who you are. It's not taught in the schools anymore if your family doesn't teach it. And I've heard this from banker friends. I've seen this happen. If they can't print or type, it's so, we are doing a bad job of putting people in place and letting them stay in place on the education level. These politicians that we have that have bought their seats. We have politicians now that are millionaires that were poor people when they were elected to office. And a couple of them, Ben, are in our state. Multimillionaires. We are hurting our children by not voting. So this is why we as Black press of America need to stand up and stand tall. We've got to care for our health, our education, and we have to put people in place that care about all of us, regardless of our health condition, regardless of how we look, the color of our hair, what our sexual preference is. If you were born in America, and Ben is a pastor, understands, I'm certified. God wants us to speak up. He doesn't want us to lay down. He wants us to speak up. He died for us to be free. So why are we being lackadaisical about it? It's on us.
Well,
our young people need us. I just told my son this morning, you better vote. Mom, he was scared because I mean that. We have to vote.
Yeah, and we were talking a little earlier about the rally that Trump, the president, is holding right now in Florida. Thousands of people without masks. Well, a Nevada man has been diagnosed as being reinfected with the virus, creating some questions surrounding potential immunity for former victims of the virus. Deanna Tisdale Johnson of the Jackson Advocate in Mississippi. I know you spoke earlier about the importance of the ACA and the importance of those that have the virus and being treated. And any thoughts on this reinfecting? We also know, along with that, the feud that's erupted between the president and the head of his coronavirus task force, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Yes, I think that there's still so much that we don't know about the coronavirus. That's why I don't understand why in Mississippi our mask mandate has been lifted. I don't understand why we don't have a bit stricter regulations just until we figure out what we're actually dealing with. There are still millions of Americans who are infected, who are either still recovering or having effects of it. And we won't have enough information to really move forward until time goes by. So I think that's really important for us to still bunker down a little bit. I know everybody wants to have the freedom to move around a little bit more because we've never experienced anything like this. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to understand more about what we're dealing with before we return back to the way that life was before. And the fact that the Trump administration used Dr. Fauci's words out of context in a political campaign ad without his permission is egregious. You shouldn't do that to someone who is trying to, one, help Americans through a global pandemic, and two, who has never had any political affiliation publicly in the 5 decades that he's been a medical professional. So that is really important. And it brings me back to what we were talking about before, about the vote. Especially in Mississippi, we have a candidate now, Mike Espy, who was our first representative since Reconstruction. And now he is running for Senate. And he had a really great run in 2018. We saw the tides changing amongst voters, where we were inching closer to, where Mississippi is a red state. Democrats were inching closer to that line. And we still have a chance. We are not out of the race. And I think I was motivated the last time I went to vote by a 22-year-old who had never voted before. And he saw the importance because of the comments that Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith said in 2018 against African Americans. And he saw that it affected him. And I think that's the power of the young vote, is making sure that we know that things affect us. It's kind of like when I was in school and some students used to say, I don't see how I'm going to use math in everyday life. Why do I have to take this class? It's connecting to what is important to young people, that they understand how our government works, that they're knowledgeable about our city council, about our mayor, about our supervisors, about our governor and other officials, that they know these people's names. I remember when I was growing up, I knew Janet Reno. I knew who she was, and it's connecting. It's having that face-to-face. I know who this person is. I know what their job is. I know how this will affect me. And that is how we garner more of the young vote. And I think they're engaged. I think they're engaged now more than they ever have before. And we have to keep that up. We have to keep going, and we have to vote November 3rd.
And Deanna, Dr. Taves, I want to go to you on this because Deanna brought up about election ads, and recently, over the last 2 weeks, the families of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and baseball great Jackie Robinson has chastised publicly the president for using their names and likeness in his ads. Dr. Taves, your thoughts on that?
Well, yes. Again, I think the King family and the Robinson family did right to speak up. We have to protect Dr. King's legacy. We have to protect Jackie Robinson's legacy. We have to protect Muhammad Ali's legacy. We have to protect all those sheroes and heroes that made a big difference. And I think that sports, I want to salute those NBA players that kneeled, those NFL players that kneeled, those Major League Baseball players that kneeled. And it wasn't just about the flag, it was about what was happening to Black America in terms of the absence of Black Lives Mattering to those in law enforcement. And so I think that all these issues come together. And I think that, Stacey, if anything, and this is where the Black press comes in, I think the mainstream media has underestimated the resolve of Black America, and particularly our young people. If you watch some of these television coverage, they always say, well, these people are still marching. Why are they marching? They don't understand that each generation not only inherits a legacy, but each generation applies the legacy in their own lives. And that's why I'm so proud of the young people today. I think this is the best generation, the most gifted, the most talented generation of youth that we've been blessed to witness. What our young people need today is encouragement. And they're going to get that from the Black press. I'm thankful that many young people today are resubscribing to the Black press. They're searching out for the Black press. Some publishers are telling me, even people go snatch the paper out of the, they're waiting for it to come because they want to see, because they know they're going to get the truth, but they also know they're going to get a modicum of encouragement and motivation and inspiration. You see, because sometimes you can report the news in a way that will make you depressed, that will make you throw your hands up. The gift for the Black press is like the gift for the Black church. Yeah, well, we may, the Black church and the white church may be preaching the same gospel, but it comes out different. The impact comes out different.
Exactly.
That's how we apply that reality, And so that's why I believe that the Black press is going to continue to help contribute to the massive voter turnout, GOTV, getting out the vote as we approach November the 3rd. And as I've said in many of my speeches over the last 60 years, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, don't ever let anything or anybody break your spirit. The spirit of Black America is strong, is resilient, even during this COVID-19, where we're disproportionately impacted. The resilience is still there. Our not just our will and desire to live, but our determination not to allow those forces of oppression, those forces of systemic racism, those forces of voter suppression break our spirit. If anything, you're going to see longer lines. The more you try to stop us, the harder we're going to vote, and the more massive we're going to vote. So that's the message from the Black press of America.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chavis. And we got about 90 seconds left. So Fran, Deanna, and you too, Dr. Chavis, I'm going to throw this out to you. And perhaps you can rapid fire answer this question if you can. Charles Dickenson's A Tale of Two Cities famously started with the words, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." Does the panel believe that we are increasingly living in two different worlds, one for people of color and the disenfranchised, and the other for those trying to hold on to power in spite of changing demographics and other factors?
Well, I would say that we're in the changing of times.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I mean by that, it's not a choice between the best of times and the worst of times. That we're going to take the worst of times and change them into the best of times. And then what best of times we already have, we're going to make them better than the best of times. We have to take where we are and move forward. And dare not let anybody trick us to going backwards. Dare not let anybody think that we don't have the power to move forward and to advance the interests of our people. And that's why every time those Black newspapers come off the press, that in itself is a significant indication of our defiance of oppression, of our defiance of racism, of our defiance of falsehood, because we print the truth, we advocate the truth, and then we dare to live the truth that we print.
Thanks, Dr. Chavis. Fran, Deanna?
I like to say that this has been something that has been a passion of mine, to just go back and look at our history and how we got to be where we are today. And we used to be, you know, collectively as a race, more Republicans. You know, that was Lincoln's party. And then, of course, the tide changed, and we are historically now more Democrats. But I feel that now our challenge, you know, won't be who's in leadership. Our challenge is to be able to understand the other side. Right now, there's a schism amongst us where we don't understand the other side. The other side is really a polar opposite of us, and we can say that we demonize one side or the other. The challenge will be for us to come together as Americans and understand each other, where we are, and be able to work together on behalf of everyone who lives here in this great nation. I think that is our challenge, more than Donald Trump being reelected or more than Biden becoming our next president. Our challenge is coming together as Americans, because we're getting further and further away to the left and to the right.
Thanks, Deanna. And Fran?
Well, Deanna pretty much wrapped it up there.
All
but
right.
I truly agree with her. We're not the only ones, people of color, that are suffering. Our sisters and brothers that are like us, just don't look like us, that are working to try to get us justice and have equal rights, they're catching hell too, excuse the expression, because we have people in America, and it's time for us to let them understand nobody's taken anything from you. When you say take the country back and they've taken our jobs, the situation is nobody's taken their jobs. The Mexicans haven't, we haven't. It's that these certain Americans don't want to work. These Mexicans are used to low incomes. Our income is great for them right now, but we have to make the world better for all of us that live on this land. As bad as COVID is, I think that one thing that COVID has done for us is make us open our eyes. It's made us open our eyes to our abilities. It's made us open our eyes to who cares about us. Because obviously, our president doesn't care about us because he's telling us not to cover our face. He didn't cover his face. He doesn't care about us of color. Again, I mentioned earlier that he didn't even go do anything for Cain, and Cain just loved him to death, obviously. But it's time for us to try to work together. But as people of color, we cannot stand down. We have to step up, speak up, and go forward. And the Black Press is going to take us there.
Absolutely. Fran Ferreira of the County News in North Carolina, Deanna Johnson of the Jackson Advocate in Mississippi, and of course, our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis Jr. We appreciate it. Next week, this 8 o'clock, same channel, the National Newspaper Publishers Association welcomes Congressman Dwight Evans from the great state of Pennsylvania, the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Join us each week, because the week after that, we'll have another congressperson from Michigan, actually, Brenda Lawrence. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Stay tuned to the Black Press for your election coverage in 2020. Everybody have a good night and stay safe.
Same to you, Stacey, and everyone.